I've just got to switch some mics on. They told me at least one of these would make me sound less northern, so let's give it a try. Okay, can everybody hear me? Yeah, brilliant, okay. So first off, I'm really chuffed to see so many people here. This is really good. And even more impressed that so many of you are having a beer already on a Tuesday. Nice work. But I wanted to say thank you to you guys for being here, but for Wired Sussex for inviting me, but also to continuing recognising the importance of supporting creative futures, because I think this is partly what this event is about. I'm here today to talk to you about, in a roundabout way, this book that Virginie introduced earlier. But it's a wider conversation than that, really, and it's a conversation about employment and what that means for creative people in what is a completely changing landscape at the moment. As Virginie said before, I've literally scoured the globe, searched high and low for content for this book. It took me 3 years to write, a year for them to publish it in English and in Spanish. So if there's anyone speaking Spanish, can you check that one is also the same as this one, because I don't know if it is. And I've conducted interviews with every single person in the book, okay? And many more besides that didn't quite make it, as well as quizzing academics relevant to the disciplines in the book and also leading industry professionals. So just to set you off, there's over 30 case studies in here, and I'm just going to give you a list of the sorts of disciplines you're going to find in it. So it covers artists, designers, sculptors, filmmakers, games designers, fashion designers, art directors, illustrators, architects, and many more. So if you don't find yourself in that list, it's not the end of the world, because every single technique in here is applicable to more than one discipline. They're all transferable. Okay, so, excellent. Creativity requires opportunities, and equally opportunities require your creativity. And these opportunities are born out of a variety of different situations. They're not just found in job adverts. Because you can only get a job if that job already exists. If someone's identified a need, someone else has raised the capital, if they have written the job description, posted the advert, you've found it, you've decided to apply, you make the shortlist, you make the interview, you get selected at the interview, and then you start. Okay, that's the kind of standard British process to getting a job. But it takes quite a long time. That time lag from having the idea to getting someone to do it can be months and months. And in that sense, you're not being particularly future thinking in that sense. It's quite a slow response to what is a really quick discipline. And so instead, hopefully, some of you won't just get a damn job, but you might make one, because that's a much more active and proactive approach to the situation. And being enterprising and carving out your own opportunities can enable you to respond more quickly than other people, and also perform independently of market needs such as supply and demand. So I must be asked, mostly by my students, I might add. I'm a lecturer at Britton University. I run the interior architecture course. I mostly get asked, why did you write a book? Are you not busy enough teaching us? And where did the idea for the book come from? Well, it kind of comes from quite a personal place. And in my opinion, all books, whether they're fact or fiction, have some kind of personal connection to the author. And this one definitely does for me. So this is from a place of passion, determination, and complete and utter turmoil at times. And I'll tell you a little bit about that and why that's important. But it really starts with this guy here. When I read about this guy, does anybody recognise him? Okay, well, it's not my dad. It's a guy called Gavin Brown, and I read about his story and the way that he entered the arts world back in the early 90s. And it made me really think about how, surrounded by creative people, students, graduates, living in Brighton and working in Brighton as well, surrounded by creative people, and I thought, well, there must be lots of people around the world who have stories similar to him, who's transitioning from a student to professional as he was, or changing disciplines later on in life, and in an equally powerful way. And so for those of you that don't know his story, he graduated as an art student out of Newcastle Poly, I think it was, in the early 90s, and like many young northern lads, he had a dream, and so he moved to New York City. And he raised the money to move to New York City, so I'm told, by selling overpriced posters of boy bands to tourists in London. And when he got there, he was determined kind of to not go unnoticed. You know, you're this guy from Newcastle and you're in one of the world's biggest art cities. How do you make a mark? How do you do something that they've not seen before? And that was his intention. So he wanted to be a gallerist. He wanted to put on exhibitions rather than be an artist himself. So he had to find somewhere to put on his first show. He didn't know anybody. He didn't have the connections, he didn't have the contacts. He couldn't swindle a good deal in Chelsea's best kind of hot spot at the time. So instead he had to think laterally, and he booked the room of a hotel. He booked room 828 of some hotel in Chelsea, I forget the name now. And he found a painter whose work that he liked, but that no one else really liked at the time. And they put on a show together in this hotel room. They took down all the paintings and all the furniture, and he put her work up instead. And so essentially they had a solo show for the price of a hotel room in Chelsea. They invited people by postcard, hand-delivered postcards, and in order to access the exhibition, you picked up the private key card from reception. So they needed no staff, no security, no invigilators. And between the two of them, they did what they set out. They completely took the New York art scene at that time by storm, and people still talking about it, and he now has, well, I'll let you read about him. He's now got quite an impressive career. Although I should point out, actually, the painter's husband ended up picking up the credit card bill for the hotel because the other two didn't have any money at all. So when he started out, it was in the midst of the early arts market downturn in the 90s, and he found that quite an invigorating climate, I guess. And that's where the synergy between his story and the personal part of my life that inspired the book kind of comes in. So, as they said earlier, I studied architecture as a student for a long time. I got my undergraduate degree, I got my postgraduate degree. I did rather well. I came out of it alive, which is always a good start. But within 18 months of graduating, after 7 years of studying, I had 2 redundancies because I graduated into the recession of 2008, which, needless to say, puts anyone at quite a low morale. As a result of that, I had to take a job I didn't like. I didn't like it because I was no good at it. As a result, I experienced my first ever panic attacks. And there's nothing quite like something that begins to affect your health and things like that make you start to reevaluate what you're doing and why you're doing it and what's important to you. So after wrestling with the reality of I've studied for 7 years to do this thing, oh God, maybe I shouldn't do that thing anymore. It's quite a difficult position to be in at any age, and there's a number of case studies in the book that have been through a very similar thing. And so after my family had supported me through those 7 years of university, then had to explain to my dad that I was no longer going to be an architect, that wasn't following the traditions of the profession in that way, wasn't going to be how I was going to be heard, or wasn't going to be the way in which I was going to make a difference. And so being an architect was no longer at the top of my list. It didn't actually feature on my list at all. I just had to find a new way to be involved and a new way to say what I needed to say. So really that's just a little bit about me and why the book is what it is. And I wanted to provide something of some substance that other people going through similar things might find a help in terms of what to do next in the creative world. So I'm going to read to you the very first paragraph that I wrote, and it's published in the introduction, and it's on the wall behind me. So first things first. Oh, I should point out that this is written as if I'm speaking to my students. A lot of the book is written as if I'm having a conversation with them, either in the lift or the coffee queue. So first things first. The days of trading in your degree certificate for a nice, safe job offer are gone. And who knows if they will ever return. It's simply not enough to graduate anymore because the world demands more from you. You are the future. You are the next generation of entrepreneurs, of design thinkers, hyper-specialists and cultural agitators. You have a role and you have a responsibility. It's no longer about the world of the design, it's about the design of your world. You'll be aware that the prospect of finding work is tough going. You've heard nothing but horror stories from people like me since the economic downturn, yet you still chose a design degree. You are still chasing that dream. Why? Because secretly, deep down, you know that the future will be led by free-thinking, forward-looking, rule-bending, problem-solving, question-asking social radicals. That's why. At least I hope that's why. So even though you guys clearly are already awesome because you're here, everyone out there is also awesome. So you're in a position where how do you make sure you're noticed? How do you compete in all the noise? How do you stand out? And how do you get your big break? Well, there's no quick fix to that, I'm sorry. But I'm going to help, I hope. So these days, unfortunately, you do not get a job. The term get, to me at least, suggests a certain amount of affordance, and there's very little room for that in the arts, design and creative disciplines for that. You don't get a job and you don't find a job. In my opinion, you have to make that job. You've got to take control of your destiny and make your own opportunities. Now, it's important to point out at this point in time that that doesn't just mean going freelance or being self-employed or setting up on your own. You can also make a job by making the employer that you want to work for notice you. So you can search out and make yourself seen and heard and be indispensable. Because I read a thing that Richard Branson wrote on LinkedIn the other day. This isn't my normal kind of style, but and what he was saying was that, and I know he's in a financial position to be able to do this, and many of us aren't, that he very rarely hires people when he has a vacancy. If he's working with someone and they've impressed him, he makes an opening for them, or he finds some way of keeping them involved until the right project comes along. And lots of people do that in really different ways. You might have read in the intro for this talk online that only 1 in 4 job ads is actually advertised. So what's happening to all the others? How are they getting filled? Yeah? So the book is presented in chapters, I guess, but more strategies, which are all written on the front, written in bold. And under each strategy, there's a set of case studies. I'm going to show you a couple of them today, showing different examples of how real-life people have achieved results within that strategy. So, for example, propaganda, going mobile, making tough calls, going it alone or teaming up, and having gusto. Each of those strategies is presented alongside expert advice from established industry professionals of their stories and tips and tricks from them. And it's also probably important to point out that all the text from the case studies themselves is written in the first person. This hasn't been through 3 or 4 editors. This isn't a kind of publisher's editorial version of what happened. This is what they said when we spoke. So you're getting a kind of really true version of their experiences, and it's quite brutal at times. So I'm going to take you through 3 of those case studies, and I think I've chosen ones that you're going to like. I changed them up for each talk. So here we go. This is Matthew Britton. And Matthew is a net artist. Is anybody else a net artist? Anyone else know what a net artist is? Excellent. Well, let's have a look. He makes unique internet-based arts projects. And I'm going to do my best to describe his work, but I'm going to show you some examples which I think will do it much better. He's all about collaboration. He's all about engaging his viewers in the process of making, sharing, and cultivating his work. It can be quite close to the edge sometimes, but I suppose that's what we have art for. But he's quite a brave guy. I was going to say young guy then, but I don't know how old he is, and I don't know how brave he is, because actually that's the only photo I can find. There's no photos of his face anywhere, not even when I asked for one to put in the book, which is interesting. So this is his current Twitter profile picture. I'm going to, as I said before, there's quotes from each of the people. So this is what he said to me. The majority of my time was spent applying for pre-existing opportunities, and I felt that this time would be better spent in devising new methods of gaining employment. Whether this would be through self-funding projects or simply being innovative about how I could bring exposure to my practice. So Matthew does things a little differently. It's a picture of one of his works behind me, and I'll explain that to you in a second, but he kind of exists in this packed creative social media world. And somehow he manages to innovate really transparently almost every single day on some kind of social platform. He uses social media and these unique online projects to share his ideas, his thoughts, and to connect with other artists, gallerists and more. And most of his new projects have come from self-initiated projects in the first place. Finding designers that are, or artists, designers, creatives that are open to sharing their ideas for free early on online isn't commonplace. It doesn't happen that often. And this is what makes him so unique. He is totally blasé to whether you like it or not. And I think he gets something, as an artist, something quite special out of it, and that's what makes him so different. This project is called, hang on. There we go, Out of Office. And it's what he calls a micro-curatorial platform that uses the auto-reply feature on email accounts to distribute art. I wish to suggest an even more intimate method of distributing and viewing online works, one which is primarily in the comfort of your own mailbox. In order to view the work, you need to only send an email to the assigned email address and wait for the auto-reply. So there's an exhibition in the gallery which is full of these business cards that has people's email addresses on them. And you pick one up and you send them an email. They're never there. It's a kind of bot system of art distribution. You don't know what you're going to get back. You don't know if anyone else has received it. And it's kind of an interesting process for utilising kind of autonomous digital processes to distribute something very unique. This is one of the first projects of his that I discovered, and I appreciate his graphics are kind of not tip-top in some cases, but this is the first project of his that I discovered, and this is called Mam's Fridge Gallery. Has anyone come across this? Okay, so as you do, I'm guessing he still lives at home, because he uses his mum's fridge as an online gallery for people's work. They can submit their images as long as it is downloadable and printable. All the works are selected by his mother. They're curated by his mother, and they are exhibited on his mother's fridge for a 2-week period. He says, The Mum's Fridge Gallery is located at the heart of my mother's kitchen and operates on a hinged 33 by 20-inch greyish-green door. The project suggests an offline platform in which to commend ideas shared over the internet. Now, what I really love about this is that he's kind of taking the mick a little bit, which I'm okay with. It really questions the necessity of a physical gallery space and the way in which we consume art and what we take seriously and what we don't. And he's trying to connect his audience with this idea of a domestic space and how that features into the art world. And so here's a couple of examples. And what I can't show you, but that is kind of even more fun, is that he also streams dinner time from a webcam that just kind of focuses just on the fridge door. So you see the backs of people's knees kind of walking past him, or people bending down to get things out. And it only lasts kind of that 10 or 15 minutes of cooking or preparation time, and then it goes quiet and it switches off. And if you scroll through his website, from kind of the first one of these from back in 2014, I forget how many he did now, but if you scroll down through and you see the viewer numbers from the first one that was like 4 people, which I think was probably me and 3 others, to the end, it's kind of getting quite a bit of traction. And I think it's quite an interesting way to use quite simple digital tools to make quite an impact. And I don't know, I have a bit of a soft spot for this idea of domestic life and art kind of being intermixed. This is another quick one. This is called Blocked Twitter. Everyone that blocks him on Twitter, he draws a portrait of them and then posts it, which I think there's probably quite a few. And then this is one of my personal favourites. He sells his unused ideas on eBay. So how does something like that even work? Well, he says, you're bidding for the intellectual property of an unrealised art idea from the artist Matthew Britton. The winning bidder will receive the unrealised art idea via email once all funds have been exchanged, will become the current owner of the intellectual property and have permission to realise the unrealised art idea. So how many unrealised ideas do you all have? Hundreds, thousands, probably. And it's you who determines whether they're any good or not and whether you realise them or not. He's taking that completely out of his own hands now. No one knows what they're getting. It's beginning to question what value you place on other people's ideas and whether you believe it's the same as your own. And it kind of really makes you think about that initial part of the design process. Okay, this is what he says to me. I swear by and deploy the software philosophy of release early and release often. And he really does, numerous times a day. In regards to being creative, I believe that work is critiqued and sculpted by its viewer, and that you shouldn't be afraid of these interactions. We can be quite holistic and protective and territorial over our ideas until we decide they're finished, until we decide other people should see them. And he's quite brutal with his own work. At the very beginning, the very conception of an idea, he lets it out. And then he kind of lets other people determine whether it's going to be something or not. There's another one that I haven't put in here, which is this live, open Google Doc for anyone in the world to contribute to. And you flick through that and you read that, and it's a really bizarre array of things. And then every now and again, someone just deletes the whole thing and it starts again. It brings lots of different people together with lots of different interests all into one place. So I guess there's a question here, and kind of trying to reel that back in a little bit. There's one thing to be careful of in these sense, which is that, as Matthew shows quite clearly, you own your ideas whilst they're still in your head. As soon as you let go of them, they become, to some degree, public property, and choose to use that how you want to. But I guess the piece of advice in that bit is be smart about how much you share initially if you're not sure what's coming next. I'm going to take you on to a Scottish duo called Ice Cream Architecture. Has anybody come across these two before? So Ice Cream Architecture is Sarah and Ian, and they've created quite a unique way of showcasing their skills and their talents outside of the usual environment that that architects use, shall we say. Doing this, they've increased their visibility and put their work in front of all kinds of people, lots of different client types that would never have had a chance to discover who they were and how brilliant they were before. And so you've probably guessed what that unique tool is. They have an ice cream van, and it is a mobile and essentially highly approachable office, taking the kind of very static location of an architect sitting in an office, not always being particularly approachable to general public. And I can say that because I know lots of them. And it's not so much, I guess, here about being big and beautiful, but that really helps. It's rather more about being accessible and being visible. And they've chosen this really fun, community-friendly icon like the ice cream van that everyone has kind of fond childhood memories of, as a way of getting their brand identity out onto the streets every single day. Excuse me. And I guess strictly this isn't a tech venture, it's not a digital venture, but I think what's interesting about this is, and what we could all do to remember, is that we all need to be present in more than one marketplace, in more than one circle, in order to engage multiple types of clients and multiple customers and colleagues and collaborators. So this is what they say. The primary aim of the van was not necessarily about getting noticed, but was about a metaphor, suggesting that, like the ice cream van that enters communities providing a service on a daily basis, that we would also take our services out to the community. At this point, our drive was to approach architecture in a different way, and in doing so, also approach how we secured work and where we secured work. The exposed nature of the van instantly removed any barrier that might prevent people from approaching us. The van quickly became a hook and a tool for engagement, and it took us out of town halls and offices and into the streets. In a very practical way, our ethos as a practice was now personified by our brand and by the van. Its positioning during the work we undertook made the projects that we were working on more visible, but also advertised our company to a new market, allowing a word-of-mouth growth to build on our initial contracts. And so essentially they've made it their thing, and I think it's certainly working for them. They are a young practice, and they've kind of, as a result of this kind of initial branding decision, initial decision about going out into the streets, they've cultivated the sorts of architects that they are. So they now specialise in participatory work, working with the local communities, determining new projects based on how community responds to ideas. And so as a result of decisions that they've made, they've managed to develop a unique route into their future. This is the last example I'm going to show you. And I know him, I assume it's him, because this guy is also quite stealthy. I know him only as Mega, and that he's French, or so he tells me. Mega is now an art director and an illustrator, and he has gone to some extremes, I guess we could say, to make his dreams come true. He's one of those guys that doesn't put any limitations on himself at all. He genuinely believes he can do absolutely anything. And as a result, he's done some really, really super things. I guess he's undertaking things that other people probably wouldn't attempt, and that I necessarily wouldn't sanction to students. But what he did what he's had to do in a very interesting way, to get his foot in the door, and he was bold and he was cheeky with it, and as a result he's been remembered. So this is Mega's, hang on, this is Mega's story. At the time, I had no money, but I wanted to do stuff. I managed to work 6 months in a burger restaurant in order to collect the money so I could buy a ticket and go to New York, where I went to all the offices of the people I wanted to meet, record labels, skateboard companies, brand headquarters. I would just knock on doors and pretend to be a journalist. so I could meet them and interview them, all the people in the New York underground art scene, and it worked. My enthusiasm was my credibility. People would open up to me, and I even ended up being friends with some of them. Back in France, I worked a lot and produced a book called NYC Rules, a pretty ambitious graphic design project about the Big Apple's alternative scenes. Then I would go to all the magazine offices with no appointment, present what I had done, and give them a copy of my book, because everyone likes free stuff. All the important media talked about my project, and soon I was hired to become the art director of a French publication. This was the beginning of my career in the industry. People at my art school were still talking, but I was doing. Now, what's really interesting about Mega's story, and certainly nowadays, the idea of self-publishing isn't that big a deal. Lots of people are doing it, and lots of people are trying it. Well, this was back in 2002. This young lad raised a bunch of cash from working in, I think it was Burger King. I couldn't say that in the book, but I'm pretty sure it was. Raised enough cash to go over there, and the odd white lie, the odd wink and a nudge, and he managed to meet the people he wanted to meet. And he made his own project out of it. And I think certainly doing that in 2002, 14 years ago, was quite a unique thing to behold. So, as you've discovered, he wanted to art direct art publications. So how do you get someone to give you a job directing art publications? Well, you show them that you can do it. And so that's what he did. He couldn't get a project from someone else. They wouldn't believe in him until he could prove that he had those skills. So he got himself those skills, and he made himself the publication to show he had those skills. And on the back of that, he was hired to art direct other magazines after that. Because clients and employers want to know that you can do the job. The world is quite safe these days. They want to see on your CV that it says, I have 3 years experience in art direction. Alternatively, they don't necessarily know what they want until you put it in front of them. You bring a book and you say, I can write a book, here you go. Then someone else might give me another book rather than me saying, oh, I'd really like to write a book. It's kind of different. And he needed examples and he needed proof to show them, so he went out and got them for himself. And so the resolve and the tenacity, I guess, gave him the stepping stone that he needed to go from working in that burger restaurant to running his own successful business, which is what he does now. I'm going to start to wind up. There's just a couple of slides left, and I'm going to end on my favourite quote from the book, and it's not from one of the case studies. It's actually from one of the guys who gives advice on one of the strategy chapters, and his name's Jim Lai, and he runs an architecture practice called Bureau Spectacular. Awesome name. And this is a picture of his 2014 Taiwan pavilion for the Venice Biennale. It's called the Township of Domestic Parts, I think, and he has this really, really particular way of looking at the world, and I sort of have a bit of a professional crush on him, but we'll move on. This is the quote he gave me. Write a few fake CVs for versions of your future selves. Craft them, let your ambition run wild. Project a few futures, because no one is watching, and there's no sense in feeling ashamed about these fake futures. I promise you, as you print them out and you hold your plural futures in your hands, you'll gain a deep sense of clarity about what you want to do and do not care to do. And obviously, since speaking with him and since him saying that to me, I had to make my own fake CVs, which range from working on a movie with Wes Anderson to being a backroom assistant at IDEO, cataloguing their prototypes. I'm still adding to the list daily, but I highly recommend you give it a go. It might sound a little bit silly, but it's a really freeing exercise, and for someone that's kind of relatively academic in my output, at least at the moment, it makes you really think about what you might achieve if you get rid of the reality or restrictions of the things that we all kind of place on ourselves every day. It can be quite an exciting thing. So I guess that's the challenge from me to you. Because as designers now entering the industry, you find facing a really different world from that which I graduated into 10 years ago. It's got a completely different set of challenges, and the market's shifted a lot because of the people that, I guess the independent people, the ones that wouldn't follow the rules, the ones with ball-breaking ambition. And I guess you have to thank them in many ways because they've begun to pave the way. There's an opening here. People are beginning to expect something slightly different, and creative people are certainly on the more conservative industry's radar for lots of different reasons. But they have paved the way, but they've also raised the stakes a little bit. So there's lots of competition, and I give you a challenge to to show them what you're all made of. But there's one final thing about the book really that I think is important to say, and that's that it's not a how-to guide. It's not going to give you your answers which are right for you, because each of the stories in here was right for this person in their situation, in their country, at that point in their life. And yes, the ideas are transferable, but the idea is that it inspires you to think of something that's unique to you, something that's special to you now. And I guess that it's, if you can't find an opportunity that you like or that you want, then you owe it to yourself to make your own. So please accept my challenge. Show everyone what you're made of, and more importantly, make your own opportunities, make your own success, and be happy. Thank you.